Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Matan. I'll speak today about decentralized governance protocols at scale. And this name, Holographic consensus. I'll try to also explain the origin of the name. So let's start. Okay. So again, I'll make a quick definition. So I'll speak about DAOs and about governance, and I want to make a quick definition of what a DAO is to me, because it's used very liberally in the space. So I repeat what I said yesterday in my talk and a little bit in more details. So the DAO is a new form of human association that on one hand aligns the interests of actors and manages joint resources around a shared mission or goal or task like companies do, but which also becomes more effective as it grows and is also decentralized and open like free markets do. So that's my definition of DAO, which is maybe captured, summarized in those two words. It's an organization that is both orientable and super scalable. So orientable means that you can orient that organization towards directed towards any mission, and super scalable means that it scales super linearly. So when you grow the organization, it becomes more effective rather than less effective, as all organizations are. And that's to compare with the firm, which is orientable but sub-scalable. It becomes less and less effective as it grows, and the markets, which are super scalable but non-orientable. So as we said, the DAO is orientable and super scalable, and to afford a super scalable organization, you need to have a super scalable governance system, and that's the theme of the talk. So how do you form a super scalable governance system? It's very counterintuitive. You have more and more agents, and thus more and more decisions to make, and you are becoming more and more effective in making those decisions. Very counterintuitive. So let's see what do really like. Let's paint or draw super scalability in some more visuals. So for example, let's say we have a really large organization. So everything that I'm saying here today is about large organizations. So we have a very large organization here, and let's just assume we are just doubling it. So now we have twice the size of the organization, right? So like scalability means that now we can perform all of the decisions of the first and all of the decisions of the second, which now means that it's just like two organizations, roughly just doubling the organization. Now in reality, if we just had the capacity to perform decisions, this large organization would also have interactions between those two imaginary organizations, and thus you'll need to process even more effective decisions in the larger organization. So that's what we mean by super scalability, being able to grow and then also saturate the entire space of decisions that comes about from growing. Now that's very another way to put it is that when the number of agents grows, the number of decisions can grow super linearly. Now, why is that so counterintuitive? Because we are used to this picture. We are used to that when we are growing an organization, anyhow, all decision needs to go through some center, right? So the limit of the processing power is in the center. And the result of that is sub-scalability, which means when you grow the number of agents in the system, you become less and less effective. So you grow the number of decisions you can process sublinearly. Okay, so that's the definition of what we want to achieve today, which is a super scalable governance system, and let's try now to see how we can afford that. So firstly, what is the problem? Again, I'm repeating from yesterday, the problem is a core tension between resilience and scalability, right? So if you want to have more and more collective attention attending each and every decision, then clearly you are less scalable. If you want to have little amount of collective attention put in each and every decision, then potentially you're not resilient, right? So if small group of people can take decisions on behalf of the larger DAO, clearly that's potentially sensitive to faulty behavior. And when I say faulty behavior, I mean both attacks, right? So a small group can literally attack the larger fund, for example, but also just decoherence. So you can just take decisions that are not in line with the greater majority. So that's another maybe less risky form of faulty behavior. So by definition, by everything we just defined, by definition, the desired outcome should be something that we call holographic consensus, which means that we should allow for a small group of people to take decisions on behalf of the larger DAO, but in a way that ensures the coherence between those decisions, the local decisions, and the global alignment, what I call the DAO's truth. So of course, DAOs don't have objective truth, right? They're just like any creature. They have their mind, their hive mind. And the truth of the DAO is basically the outcome of decisions if all agents had the capacity to consider those decisions and spell output whatever the output is. Maybe most of them will not even express any opinion, but at least they had the capacity to look at it and see that it makes sense, or at least they don't have the mental capacity to express anything. So this is the definition of holographic consensus, and this will be the desired outcome of a scalable or super scalable governance system. And the way that we are, the way it works is that we are putting a prediction game, so a prediction game in Gen tokens, the tokens of DAO Stack project, that ensures the alignment between those decisions by basically crypto-economically incentivizing, finding glitches, and protecting them. And we'll see how it works. So before diving into the protocol, let me just go through a few insights from off-chain computation. So I'll just go very briefly through, I think it was the first off-chain computation protocol in 2015. It's an off-chain computation marketplace. So let's say that I need to compute $1,000 worth of computation on the Ethereum blockchain. And let's just for now assume there is no gas limit. So then anyone can run it locally. It's pretty cheap. And attest the result. So I can run it on my machine. I can see the result of that computation is 5. Maybe that computation is part of a larger program. And then I attest to the blockchain, to the contract, that the result is 5. And I'm willing to stake $2,000 on that attestation. So I put that on the contract. So if after some time there is no claims against it, we'll just use that attestation as the right result, and we'll print it into the larger computation. However, anyone can verify locally on their machine the computation. It's very cheap. And perhaps within the confirmation period, someone says, no, the result is 4, and I'm willing to stake $2,000 for that. And then, of course, once we have conflict, then we do the computation on-chain. The wrong attester lose their stake, cover for the cost of the computation, the remaining goes to the right attester, right? So this is the very simple protocol, and that's also the insight for decentralized governance at scale. So the bottom line, rather than having, so we always thought that consensus means that everyone needs to look at everything. So rather than that, we can have everyone can look at everything, plus reward the right attestations, put high penalty for wrong attestations, and then high gain for signaling wrong attestations. Okay, so with that, let's try to build up the protocols in steps. So firstly, the immediate suggestion would be to start with a relative majority rather than absolute majority. So absolute majority means that each decision needs to be considered by roughly all voters, and then you need to have majority of reputation holders, of all reputation holders, to support the decision in order to execute it. In a relative majority scenario, you open a decision for a certain period of time, let's say a week, then whoever votes on that decision within that time votes, and then whatever those people who voted decides, that's what we execute. If majority of those who voted, not of all reputation holders, but just majority of those who voted say yes, we're executing the proposal. If they say no, we reject the proposal. So this is relative majority. Now the problem with relative majority is that it's resilient to attack, right? I can open now 1 million proposals. Clearly most of them will be unnoticed. I'm completely diluting the collective attention. And then in one of them, or maybe in some of them, I will have a deadly transaction. Maybe I'll just transfer all of the funds to my wallet. So then the first or the early trials with that to protect this problem were coming from putting a quorum, so you need a certain level of voting power on a proposal to be considered valid. But the problem with quorum, and that's roughly the problem with any static parameters, is that if quorum is set too high, then you're just going back to the same problem of absolute majority. If quorum is set too low, you're getting the same problem of resilience, of relative majority. And then likely in many situations, you actually have both resilience and scale problem at the same time. So quorum doesn't solve the problem and definitely doesn't lead to super scalable organizations. So one simple solution, let's make that, I'll build it in steps. So one simple solution is to funnel the collective attention to certain number of proposals, and we'll call that boosting proposal or boosted proposals. So how it works. So you have a queue, anyone can open a proposal into the queue, and by default, a proposal in the queue can only be executed with the approval of absolute majority. Now queues get some rank, and we'll discuss what is the rank method later. And under some conditions, proposals can be transferred from queue to the boosted list. The boosted list has right now n proposals. And the boosted period, the proposals are open for finite time. At the end of that time, they are being decided about by relative majority. So that method basically are funnelings on the entire collective attention is guaranteed to be looking at very small and protected number of certain proposals, and by that increasing the effectiveness of the collective attention. So this is the funneling method. So this is nice. Let me show you a little bit how it works specifically, and that's the demo that I showed yesterday. So these are mock-ups from this demo. So anyone can. This is the Alchemy, that's the application for decentralized budgeting of open source projects. So anyone can open any proposals, and almost everything that I'll show here is completely configurable. So anyone, it's also configurable. Like you can put conditions on who can open proposal. Right now, the default is that anyone, so you don't even need to be a member of the DAO to make a proposal. But you can also configure that so that you need to hold certain threshold of reputation to open a proposal. And then you can open any proposal, and that's also configurable, whether you can transact funds or whether you can change the rule of the protocol as well. And then you can also add a possible min fee, so that you need to stake some tokens in order to open proposals, and you can also put possible lifetime configurable. So for example, even absolute majority proposals can have a certain lifetime, say 2 months, after which they are just rejected, because they are not relevant anymore. And then voting a proposal is weighted by reputation, which is just an attribute number for each address. And I'll say just a couple of words about reputation flow later in the end of the talk. And then regular proposals, again, are approved by absolute majority threshold, and that's also configurable. It can be 50% or 60% or whatever chosen. Then you can boost it, and this is a condition. If the rank is higher than some threshold, R not. And then in the Genesis protocol that we're launching with, we chose R naught to be exponential in the number of already boosted proposals. So it's a very protective scheme. So you can have it less than exponential, you can have it polynomial, for example, but exponential is highly protective, as you'll see, where n is the number of boosted proposals already in the boosted list. And what happens with the boosted proposals? They are open for a certain boost period, which is also configurable. And then at the end of that period, they are decided by the relative majority. And one last point is that there is a quiet ending period, which is also configurable. So let's say the last day, no change of decision should be made in the last day. And if there was a change of decision in the last day, you just increase the boosting period with one another day until you have one last quiet day. That's critical for boosting ending attacks, against boosting ending attacks. So now we're adding the prediction game. Anyone can predict the DAO approval of a certain proposal by simply staking gen on the proposal. So I can come and say, look, I look at this proposal. Maybe I also have an interest to promote that proposal. Maybe that proposal is to fund my own project. And then I'm willing to stake $200 or maybe $2,000 because I believe that this DAO will approve that proposal. So it's per DAO. It's not an objective truth. I'm not saying something objective about this proposal is good or bad. I'm just saying that I'm predicting this DAO will approve that proposal. Now, anyone can also stake against that prediction. Of course, wrong predictors lose it all, and the right predictors gain some more gen. These are the rules of the game, a little bit in more details. I'll skim it very fast, but wrong predictors lose all of their gen tokens. Then also all of the stakes of both sides goes to incentivize the voters, the pre-boost voters. So pre-boost voters share P fraction, which is also configurable of all stakes. And we call it prediction fee. and that it's split between all pre-boost voters in proportion to their reputation. Then there is one last piece, which is the DAO bounty, which is basically added to the stake that is then gained by the successful predictor. It's critical to incentivize positive predictors in case that no one predicts against them. So you can think of it as sort of like the management cost of the DAO. And then all successful predictors gain in proportion to their stake, the lost stake of the losers, plus the DAO bounty, minus the prediction fee. Notes that regular proposals in the queue that are hitting lifetime are considered rejected, and accordingly positive stakes put on them are lost. Now, how do we fix the rank? So generally, you can have many different formulae, and it can depend on, for example, the amount of votes that voted yes, and the amounts of votes that voted no, the amounts of stakes that put yes, and the amount of stakes that predicted no. And we choose a very, very simple formula, just S plus minus S minus, which is the sum of gen predicted that a proposal will pass, minus the sum of gens predicted that a proposal will not pass. Now, why don't we make it also dependent on the voting? Because that's already implicitly taken into account with the staking, right? Like if I see that Vitalik just approved the proposal in Ethereum, I will run to put a stake that it will pass because I know that he's a very influencer. So what is the outcome of that? What is the outcome of that that is protecting the collective attention? So you see that when you have more boosted proposals, number n, it means that there is exponentially higher boosting threshold because R naught goes like exponential of n, and thus exponentially more supporting stake needed for yet another proposal to be boosted. But once that amount of stake was put in favor of that proposal, there is exponentially more interest of those who staked it to make sure that the right votes shows up. Like if I stake for a proposal, I put $5,000, and then eventually I see that when it goes into the boosting period, the proposal seems not to be passing, then I know that something is wrong, or at least I think that something is wrong. Then I can call the voters that I think that are influencers and should be in favor of that proposal. Maybe they didn't show up yet to vote it. So basically, I'm acting right now as a signaling agent. Basically, we are outsourcing signaling or navigation of collective attention to a greater audience, because the audience of stakers, or the predictors, and that's important to express, is not within the DAO. So it's a much, much greater audience that can look at each and every proposal. So the bottom line of that is that if there exists a gap between a proposal status and its believed majority outcome, then this gap turns into a potential reward, which then generates an economic incentive to fish those glitches. The second point is that predictors, like any investors and traders in the market, in fact, like any market, economic market, go under economic evolution and improve over time. So if I'm a good predictor, I make nice profits, which means that I have more money to put even more larger stakes and make even more money. And if I'm a bad predictor, I'm losing my money and I stop making predictions. So you can see that token holders can boost or filter proposals, but they cannot make decisions. So you cannot buy a decision, so it's protected, but you can buy it into consideration. But of course, if you're buying into consideration a bad proposal, you're going to lose your money. Also note the logic similarity to off-chain computation that I've just mentioned in the beginning, but also to Fisherman protocol of parity or Polkadot if you look at it. So almost at the end of the talk, just a quick comparison with FutureKey, because that's a question that comes about often. So FutureKey is also a prediction market game for governance. Now the difference is that, and that's also my critics for FutureKey, is that FutureKey is purely economic. So the prediction market not only signals, but also makes the decision. And the outcome is twofold, or the problem is twofold. So firstly, this kind of system cannot account for a wide variety of value systems. So it's pure economic, and by that is very narrowed in the value system it can reflect. And the second, that is highly manipulable, just as markets are highly manipulable, as we see every day. And that's why regulation basically came about. So the second part of that comment is just to say that we notice that in governance there are really two different functions. So one function is the decision, and another function is the signaling. So if you want the choice making and sense making, and decisions are well made by governance bodies, but then signaling is well made by markets. So we just disentangle those two functionalities and let the market do the signaling, the sense making, and the decision body to do the decision, the choice making. I won't say much about reputation flow. What I mean by reputation flow is that how reputation changes in the system beyond the simple way, which is just manual reputation flow. So we can make a proposal in the system to add or subtract reputation to an agent. But there's also algorithmic reputation flow. So for example, you can have algorithms where those who vote in accordance with the majority early on gain reputation, and those who vote different from the majority early on lose reputation. You can make algorithms that those who make successful proposals that are eventually passes gain reputation, and so on and so forth. So you can have algorithmic reputation flow, which is yet another topic. And my last slide is just mentioning that these protocols, holographic consensus, and I'm also covering here funneling collective attention, and in some sense also monetization of attention, is just a part of a greater toolkit for scalable governance system. And in particular, it should go together with delegation, the ability to delegate your votes, and compositionality, so the ability to have structures, so like a company of sub-companies, of sub-sub-companies, and so on and so forth. So all this together, I believe, by now we have a full solution for a fully super scalable governance system. Thank you.